One of the most important things to understand when it comes to filming the police is that, in the United States, you have a constitutionally protected right under the First Amendment to record public officials in public spaces, as long as you are not interfering with their duties. This is not just a vague principle. It has been tested and reaffirmed in multiple court decisions across the country. The reasoning is simple. Public accountability depends on transparency. If the public can't observe and document what officials are doing, there's no way to hold them responsible for misconduct or to ensure that they're acting within the bounds of the law. This right to record is a powerful tool, but like all rights, it's not absolute, and it comes with certain limits and responsibilities. When you're filming the police, the setting matters greatly. If you're in a public space, like a sidewalk, park, or street, you have the broadest protections. The law generally says that anything you can see or hear from a place you have a right to be, you can also record. That means you don't have to hide your camera, ask for permission, or stop filming just because an officer asks you to. However, those protections weaken if you're on private property without permission or in areas where privacy is legally expected, such as restrooms, someone's home without consent, or secure government buildings. Knowing where you stand, literally and legally, can mean the difference between exercising your rights effectively and unintentionally breaking the law. Another crucial part of this is the non-interference rule. Even if you are legally allowed to record, you can't physically interfere with an officer's ability to do their job. Standing too close during an arrest, blocking an officer's movement, or shouting in a way that disrupts their commands could be used against you. In court, officers might claim your behavior created a safety risk or hindered their duties, and this could potentially shift the legal conversation from your right to film to whether your actions were obstructive. This is why it's essential to maintain a safe and reasonable distance, close enough to capture the event clearly, but far enough to avoid becoming part of the incident. It's also worth remembering that while recording is legal, some officers may not welcome being filmed, and tensions can rise quickly. In these situations, the smartest approach is to remain calm, polite, and firm about your rights without escalating the situation. Document the interaction as clearly as possible, but don't match hostility with hostility. Often, the best footage is captured by those who keep their cool while the situation around them heats up. Not only does this protect you legally, but it also makes your footage more credible if it ever becomes evidence in court or is shared publicly. The right to record is a cornerstone of public oversight, but it's a right you must exercise with both knowledge and caution. Knowing the boundaries, respecting lawful orders, and avoiding interference will allow you to protect yourself while protecting the truth. When done correctly, filming the police isn't just legal, it's one of the most powerful acts of civic engagement you can perform. The second key point is understanding what public space really means and why it matters so much when you're filming the police. The law draws a very clear line between spaces that are considered public and those that are private, and that line determines the scope of your rights. Public spaces are places where the general public has the right to be. Streets, sidewalks, public parks, government buildings open to the public, and other locations funded by taxpayers for general use. In these spaces, courts have consistently ruled that the First Amendment protects your right to record what you can see and hear. The idea is that public officials performing public duties in a public space have no reasonable expectation of privacy. They are accountable to the people, and part of that accountability comes from the public being able to watch and document their actions. However, once you step into private property, the rules change. Property owners have the right to control whether recording is allowed on their premises. If you're invited in, they can still set restrictions. For example, a store can post a policy that prohibits photography or video recording, and if you refuse to comply, they can legally ask you to leave. If you stay after being told to leave, you could be charged with trespassing. This is a completely different legal framework from filming in public, and it's one of the most common mistakes people make. They assume that because something is visible, they can film it anywhere. That's not always true, and crossing that line can weaken your legal standing. There are also situations where the public space you're standing in may be temporarily restricted. Police can establish crime scene perimeters or restricted zones for safety and investigation purposes. While they can't use these perimeters just to keep cameras away, they can enforce them for legitimate operational needs. The key here is that the restriction must apply equally to everyone, not just to people with cameras. If they're letting other bystanders stand in a certain area, but not you because you're recording, that's a potential violation of your rights. Documenting these inconsistencies can be important later if the legality of your removal is questioned. It's also important to remember that public property does not mean you can ignore all other laws while filming. For instance, you can't trespass into non-public areas of a public building like employee-only sections and claim the First Amendment as your defense. Similarly, you can't block traffic or physically interfere with others' use of the space. Public access is not absolute. It comes with the responsibility to use the space lawfully. Knowing whether you are in a public or private space, and whether any lawful restrictions are in place, is foundational to exercising your right to film effectively. This awareness helps you stand your ground when challenged and keeps you from accidentally stepping into a legal trap. The more you understand about the boundaries of public space, the more confidently and safely you can record events that matter. The third key point revolves around maintaining a safe and lawful distance when you are filming the police. This is one of those areas where people often get themselves into unnecessary trouble, not because they didn't have the right to record, but because they crossed the line into interfering with law enforcement duties. The right to film is not a free pass to insert yourself into an active scene. Courts have recognized your First Amendment right to record, but they've also made it clear that this right exists alongside the government's legitimate interest in allowing police officers to perform their jobs without undue obstruction or danger. The most practical way to think about this is to give officers enough physical space to carry out their work. There is no universal distance set in stone. Different jurisdictions may handle it differently, and the circumstances matter. A peaceful protest being monitored by police might allow you to be closer than, say, a tense arrest situation or a crime scene investigation. Some states have passed laws specifying a minimum distance, often 8 to 25 feet, that you must keep from officers when they're actively performing their duties. Even in states without a fixed number, reasonable distance is the standard. That's a vague term, but generally, if you are so close that an officer has to alter their movements or attention because of you, you're probably too close. The danger in ignoring this is that officers can, and often will, claim you are obstructing their work. Obstruction or interference laws are not about your camera. They are about your conduct. If you're blocking their path, stepping between them and a suspect, shouting in a way that drowns out their communication, or ignoring repeated instructions to move back, you give them legal grounds to detain or arrest you. That's the trap. Your legal right to film gets overshadowed by your violation of a separate law. The smartest strategy is to position yourself where you have a clear view and can record everything important without inserting yourself into the scene. If officers ask you to move, you can calmly ask, "Where would you like me to stand so I'm not interfering?" This does two things. It shows you are cooperating, and it makes their instructions part of the record if you're already filming. If they tell you to move far beyond what seems reasonable, you can comply in the moment to avoid escalation, and then challenge the legality later. This point is about balance, protecting your rights without unnecessarily escalating the situation. You don't want your footage to end because you got arrested for a preventable reason. The closer the situation is to danger or tension, the more important distance becomes. By maintaining a safe and lawful space, you ensure your right to record remains intact, and your evidence is admissible without being tainted by claims of interference. You're not just protecting yourself legally, you're protecting the integrity of the story you're trying to capture. The fourth key point is about understanding when the police can lawfully order you to stop recording and what limits exist on that power. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the right to film, because many people assume that officers have no authority to restrict recording under any circumstances. In reality, while your First Amendment right to document public officials in public spaces is strong, it is not absolute. There are specific, narrow situations where officers can impose restrictions, and knowing them helps you avoid unnecessary confrontation while still protecting your rights. First, officers cannot tell you to stop recording simply because they don't like being filmed, feel uncomfortable, or claim you are disrespecting them. Public officials performing their duties in public have no general right to privacy from being recorded. The law is clear on that point. However, they can set reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions if your recording genuinely interferes with their work or poses a safety threat. For example, if you are standing in the middle of an active roadway to capture a traffic stop, they can order you to move for safety reasons. If you are shouting questions during a tense standoff and distracting officers, they can lawfully tell you to quiet down or relocate. The second category of limits comes from specific locations where privacy or security laws apply. You generally cannot walk into a private office in a police station and start filming without permission. Likewise, if you're in a restricted area at a crime scene, marked by tape, barricades, or verbal instructions, you can't cross into it just to get a better shot. Those restrictions are not about stopping your recording. They are about keeping unauthorized people out of sensitive areas. If the police can exclude anyone from a certain spot, they can also exclude you, even if your purpose is filming. Another situation to understand is when the recording involves confidential information. For example, if officers are dealing with undercover personnel, a juvenile suspect, or a victim in a vulnerable situation, they may ask you not to record certain details or images. While they can't usually seize your camera or delete footage without a warrant, they might be able to set rules that prevent you from capturing sensitive moments in the first place, so long as the restriction is narrowly tailored and based on a legitimate need. The key is to separate lawful orders from unlawful intimidation. If an officer says, "Stop recording or you'll be arrested," your job is to calmly ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to go? And on what legal basis are you ordering me to stop filming?" By keeping your tone respectful and your camera rolling, you put the burden back on them to justify their command. If it's a lawful order, complying in the moment is the safest move, and you can challenge it later in court. If it's not lawful, their response, or lack of one, becomes part of your record. The fifth key point is about what to do if the police try to seize your phone or camera while you're recording. This is an area where many people panic, either because they're afraid of losing expensive equipment or because they believe the police have unlimited authority in that moment. The reality is that officers generally cannot take your recording device without a warrant or a clear, lawful exception to the warrant requirement. Understanding this distinction is critical to protecting both your rights and your footage. Your phone is considered personal property, and the Fourth Amendment protects it from unreasonable searches and seizures. This means that, under normal circumstances, an officer cannot simply grab it from your hand or demand that you hand it over just because you're filming them. They need a warrant issued by a judge, supported by probable cause, to lawfully seize your device. The only exceptions would be if there's an immediate, compelling reason, like preventing the imminent destruction of evidence or addressing an urgent safety threat. Even then, the burden is on the officer to justify that exception later in court. It's important to note that "I don't want to be recorded" is not a legal justification for taking your phone. Neither is "you're making me uncomfortable," or "this is interfering with my job," unless you are actually breaking a law or creating a safety hazard. If an officer claims they need your phone as evidence, they must either secure it with a warrant or fit into one of those narrow exceptions. You are within your rights to ask, calmly and directly, "Do you have a warrant?" or "Am I being legally required to surrender this device?" Those questions put them on notice that you understand your rights, and they also create a verbal record for anyone reviewing the situation later. Another common misconception is that officers can delete your footage. They cannot. In fact, courts have repeatedly ruled that the destruction of lawful recordings by law enforcement is a violation of constitutional rights. If they take your phone unlawfully or delete content, that action itself can become the basis for a lawsuit. To protect yourself, use cloud backups whenever possible. Set your phone to automatically upload photos and videos to a secure online location in real time. That way, even if your phone is taken or damaged, your footage survives. If an officer does seize your phone unlawfully, your best move is not to resist physically. Physical resistance can escalate the situation and lead to arrest, even if you're in the right legally. Instead, remain calm, document everything verbally while you can, and contact an attorney as soon as possible. By understanding the limits on police power, you shift the balance. You're no longer someone they can intimidate into surrendering your rights on the spot. You become someone who knows the law well enough to stand your ground in a smart, strategic way. The sixth key point centers on what happens after you've recorded the police and you need to protect and possibly use that footage. Filming is only the first step. What you do next can make the difference between your video serving as powerful evidence or disappearing without impact. Once you've captured something important, your immediate priority should be securing it. This means saving it in multiple places, preferably with at least one copy in a location the police cannot access or control. Cloud storage services, encrypted drives, or even sending the video to a trusted friend in real time can ensure it's preserved. Too often, people assume their phone will remain safe, but devices can be lost, stolen, or damaged, and footage can be deleted, sometimes deliberately. By creating redundant backups right away, you eliminate the risk that one mishap erases everything. After securing the footage, you should think strategically about its release. Posting it publicly online immediately might feel satisfying, but it's not always the best move. In some cases, it's smarter to first speak with an attorney or a reputable civil rights organization to understand potential legal consequences. If your video is part of an ongoing investigation or could influence court proceedings, premature release could complicate matters or even expose you to legal threats. Legal guidance helps you navigate when and how to share it so that it has maximum effect without unintended repercussions. You also need to preserve the original, unedited version of your recording. Courts and investigators put more weight on unaltered footage, and editing, even for clarity, can give opponents an excuse to question its authenticity. Keep the raw file, along with any metadata showing the time, date, and location of the recording. that metadata can be crucial in proving your video is genuine and untampered. If you must edit a copy for public viewing, always keep the original in a secure place. Chain of custody matters as well. If your video becomes part of a formal legal process, being able to clearly show where it's been stored, who's had access to it, and how it's been transferred strengthens its evidentiary value. Treat it like any important document in a legal case, organized, documented, and protected. Finally, remember that your safety and privacy matter too. Sharing police footage can draw attention, both positive and negative. Consider whether you want your name publicly tied to it and take precautions if you expect backlash. This might mean blurring your face or voice in public releases, or working through advocacy groups that can publish the material without exposing your personal information. The goal is to make sure your video contributes to accountability and justice, not to put yourself at unnecessary risk. Recording the police is about more than pressing record. It's about understanding the full life cycle of that footage, how to capture it lawfully, preserve it securely, and use it effectively when it matters most. Knowledge and preparation turn a momentary act into lasting impact.